Hello, so welcome back to this channel. So in today's tutorial we are going to be focusing on how to work with arrays in Firebase Cloud Firestore. So without wasting much time, let's go ahead and see exactly what we are going to be learning in this tutorial. Okay, so this is the app that we're going to make. It's pretty straightforward. Nothing about the design is because we really want to understand how to do some kind of things. So firstly, we are going to be learning how to save data that has array to Cloud Firestore. So as you can see, I have my normal fields in the document. I have email and full name fields, and I have another field, phone number. But this phone number is not a regular field, right? It contains an array map. This is more like JSON strings. So if I fold this up, you can see that these are JSON strings. You might be wondering how you can actually save data from your app to your Cloud Firestore in this format. We are going to be learning how to do that. So here, if I go ahead and click on save data, you can see that new documents were created. And if I open this up, you can see that I went ahead to add the full names and the phone number. Alright, but this is not all that we need to do. So after saving your data, you also need a way to be able to retrieve your data back into your app. So if I click on retrieve, so you can see that we'll be able to retrieve the full name, email address, and each of these phone numbers, the work, mobile, and the home phone number. Another thing that we might want to do most of the time will be to update this particular array. So let's say the user wants to add a new phone number. So we need to update this array. So if I go ahead and click on update phone. Okay, so if I go ahead and click on retrieve, so you can now see that the new phone number that we just added has successfully been retrieved as well. So this is more like an overview of what we are going to be learning in this tutorial. So if you're really excited and you like what we are going to learn, I need you to do just one thing for me. Go ahead and hit the like button so that more people can find out about this video. And if this is your first time of bumping into this channel, I need you to do just one thing for me, just one. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and hit the bell as well so that you can always get notified whenever I make this kind of video. So without wasting much time, let's get right into it. Okay, so like I always say, the first step to building a great app is by creating a project. So we're going to go ahead and create a new project. So I also need to mention that we are going to be a little bit fast with the tutorial. So if this is your first time of bumping into Firebase Cloud Firestore, I think this video might not be the very one you need to watch first. But you're in luck because I have a playlist of introductory videos to Cloud Firestore, which is going to explain every single thing that you need to know about working with Firebase Cloud Firestore, saving data, retrieving data, and even listening to snapshot changes. So I'm going to put the link to the videos and the playlists in the description below, so you can go ahead and check it out. Now let's go ahead and create a project. The project is going to be Firestore array. Of course, it's going to be a blank app. Alright, so our project has been successfully created. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all of this because we don't need it. So I'm going to go ahead and load up our layout file so that we can be able to do our simple design. Alright, so our layout is completely loaded. Now the next thing I need to do will be to go ahead and create a very simple design. No brainer at all. Okay, so we set up our design. What we did was to create a linear layout, set up the orientation, and added some padding. We went ahead to add 3 different buttons. The first one is the save button, and we added the retrieve button, and it tells you that we can use to be displaying our results. So this is basically all we need to do concerning our design. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and create a Firebase project. So we're going to log on to our Firebase console. So if you have a Gmail account, you can basically be able to create a Firebase project. Okay, so here is my Firebase console. I have a couple of apps here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. So I'm going to call this Firestore array. Alright, so let's go ahead and click on continue. Create project. Alright, so our project has been successfully created. So I'm going to go ahead and click on continue. Alright, now the next thing I need to do will be to go ahead and add an Android app. So all we need to do is to provide the package name of our app. So we're going to go back to Visual Studio, and we're going to go to project properties, and we're going to set up our package name. Currently the package name is com.companyname.firestore array. So I'm going to edit this to something that I like. So I'm going to change this to com.ufinix.firestore array. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this. So I'm going to paste this here. So let's go ahead and click on register app. Okay, now the next thing we need to do will be to download the Google services.json file. I'm going to click on next. Click on next. And we're going to go ahead and skip this step. So a new Android app has now been added to our Firestore project. The next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and set up the database. So the database that we're going to be using is the Firestore database. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create. We're going to be starting in test mode. Alright, so Firestore allows us to choose a location where we want our data to be saved, but we can go ahead and use the default location because we don't have time for all of this. So if you're already very conversant with all of this setup, you don't need to spend time watching it. You can actually track the video to the point where we started doing the real stuff. So now that our database has been completely set up, and the next thing we need to do will be to install the Firestore packages. So I'm going to go to the Nugget Package Manager. Okay, so here I'm going to go ahead and search for Xamarin Firebase Firestore. Okay, so this is the package that we are looking for. So recently, Xamarin just released a new version of Firebase Firestore, but on trying it out, I discovered that it is still very buggy. So to ensure that we are on the safe side, I'm going to go ahead and make use of the older version, which is much more stable. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and install this package. Alright, now there's another package that we need to install to ensure that our Firestore works appropriately just the way we want it. And this is the Xamarin Android.guava. So we're going to go ahead and install this package. And also we are going to install the earlier version, which is 27.1.0, which is the one that is compatible with the version of Cloud Firestore that we are using in our project. So I'm going to go ahead and install this. So the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and start using Firebase Firestore. Now the first thing we need to do will be to initialize it. But before we do that, we need to bring in the Google services.json file that we just downloaded from our Firebase console. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it into our project. Okay, so this is the file that we are looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and add it to our project. So I'm going to open it up so that we can see the content of which is basically all the information about our Firestore project. Now let's go ahead and initialize our Cloud Firestore. Okay, so before we do any of this, let's go ahead and build our project first of all. Okay, so we have some issues that requires our attention. Firstly, we need to return back to the Nugget Package Manager, and we need to update some of the support libraries that we have to the latest version. So that particular library is the Media Compact. So I'm going to go ahead and update it to the latest version. Okay, so now the next thing I need to do will be to go to our project properties and enable multi-dex. So I'm going to go to options. Alright, so let's go ahead and enable multi-dex. Okay, so this is basically all that we need to do. Now let's go ahead and try to build our project again. Okay, so our build is successful. Now let's go ahead and create a method that is going to initialize our Firestore. So the return type of this method is going to be Firebase Firestore. Alright, so let's go ahead and resolve this. Okay, so I'm going to call this get Firestore. So I've went ahead to create the method that is going to instantiate or initialize our Firebase Firestore. So you might be wondering that why do I have to rush it up without showing you guys. The reason is just to save some time. So all the information here, you can find it in the Google services.json. For example, the Firebase URL, which is what we see here. So we went ahead to drop it here. Okay, so even the project ID, the application ID, you can find all of that in the Google services.json. So if you really want to get a good understanding of how to create and instantiate your Firebase appropriately, your Firebase Firestore appropriately, so I have a full video on that. So I'm going to put the link to the video in the description below. So to find more about that, you can go ahead and check out the video. So now that I've successfully initialized the Firebase Firestore, the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and save some data to it. So to do that, we need to go ahead and create a reference to our save button. So this is something that we already know how to do very well. Alright, so let's go ahead and reference our save button. Alright, so now that we successfully referenced it, the next thing we need to do will be to create an event handler, a click event handler to this save button. So I'm gonna have save button.click. Alright, so successfully created the save button click event handler. The next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and save some data to it. Alright, so to save data to our Firebase Firestore, we usually make use of HashMap. So HashMap is a type of key value pair object. So let's go ahead and create our data in form of a HashMap. So firstly, I need to go ahead and say HashMap. So we need to resolve this. So I'm going to call this map. It's going to be equal to new HashMap. So this is the time we now need to go ahead and add the data that we want to save to our database. So I'm going to go ahead and say map.put. So the first field that we want to put is going to be the full name field. So I'm going to have full underscore name. And I'm going to provide the value, which in this regard is going to be Uchenna Nodim. So this is just the normal regular way of saving data to Cloud Firestore. Now the next thing we need to do will be to put the email address. So the next data that we need to provide will be the phone number. Okay, so we've already seen that the phone number is going to be a separate array on its own. Let's return back to our Firebase console. So you can see how the phone number is. So it's more like a separate array on its own that has keys and values. So to be able to achieve that, we need to go ahead and define a new hash map. So I'm going to make a hash map for the phone numbers. So here I'm going to have hash map. I'm going to call this phone map. So the next thing we need to do will be to start adding the phone numbers into this array. So I'm going to have phone map. So the first phone number I want to put is the mobile phone number. So I'm going to have mobile. Okay, so the next thing we need to do will be to add the work phone number. And the last thing we need to do will be to add our home phone number. Alright, so now that we've successfully created a phone map, the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and add the phone map into this map. So to do this, we're going to go ahead and say map.put. So the key of this array field is going to be phone number, and the value is going to be our phone map. So now that we successfully prepared the data that we want to save on Firebase Firestore, the next thing we need to do will be to actually go ahead and save it to the cloud. So I'm going to say Firebase Firestore. I'm going to call this database. So here database is going to be equal to get Firestore. So like we already know, calling this method returns an instance of Firebase Firestore. So now that we have that, the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and create a document reference. We already know that to save data to Firestore, we will need a document reference. So document reference is more like a path to where we want to save the data. So I'm going to call this docref. This is going to be equal to database.collection. So what's going to be our collection? So we can simply call this users, then .document. So by calling the .document method, it means that we want Firestore to automatically generate an ID for us, which is okay. So I'm going to go ahead and say docref.set. And here we're going to go ahead and pass in our map. So this is basically all we need to do to save our data to Firestore. Now to verify that this works, let's go ahead and run the app. Okay, so our app is starting. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up our database so that we can see the changes as we make them. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on Save Data. So most of the time when we save our first chunk of data, we need to refresh the database. So let's go ahead and refresh it. As you can see, our data was successfully saved to Firestore. So we have the email, the full name, the phone numbers. They were all saved just the way we expected it. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and try to retrieve these values. Most importantly, the ones in the array. So I'm going to go ahead and return to Visual Studio. So I'm going to stop this. So the first thing I need to do will be to go ahead and create a click event handler for the retrieve button. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and reference this. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and say retrieve button.click. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. So to retrieve the document that we just saved, I'm going to go ahead and say Firebase Firestore. I'm going to call this database. So this is going to be equal to get Firestore. So to retrieve the particular document that we just saved, I'm going to go ahead and say database.collection. So we're going to point it to the collection that we want to retrieve data from, which in this regard is users. So we're going to have .document. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the document ID of the data that we just created. When building a real app, you might not need to be manually copying your document IDs, but this is just to ensure that we don't spend a lot of time. But if you want to understand how to easily retrieve your documents without having to copy the IDs one after the other, you can refer back to the playlist where I have dedicated videos that explain exactly how to do all of this. So I'm going to go ahead and paste the document ID here. Alright, so the next thing I need to do will be to have .get. So this will go ahead and create a query that is going to return the document with this ID. So I'm going to go ahead and add on success listener. So the next thing I need to do will be to go ahead and implement the eye on success listener interface in our activity. So I'm going to scroll up to the top. I'm going to add eye on success listener. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and resolve this. Now let's go ahead and implement the interface. Alright, so the interface has been implemented. We have this method. So this is where we are going to be retrieving the values from the database. So now let's go ahead and grab the values from the document. So I'm going to say var snapshot. So this is going to be equal to a document snapshot. So what we're actually doing here is to cast the result to a document snapshot. And with this, we can now go ahead and retrieve the values from the document. So the first thing I want to retrieve will be the full name. So I'm going to say string full name. This will be equal to snapshot.get. So the field ID is full name. So I'm going to convert it to string. Now the next thing I want to get will be the email address. So I'm going to have email. So this is going to be equal to snapshot.get. But another thing we need to keep in mind is that it's always advisable to check for null before you go ahead and retrieve values from your document snapshot. The reason is because you don't want your application to crash for any reason. So it's always very necessary to check for null. And to do that, I can easily say if the data that we intend to retrieve is not null, so we're going to go ahead and retrieve it properly. I'm going to pass it email. And I'm going to convert it to string. And if it's null, I'm going to go ahead and return an empty string. Now the next thing we need to get will be the phone numbers, alright? But the phone numbers are not strings, they're kind of an array. So I'm going to go ahead and say var phone number. This is going to be equal to snapshot.get phone number. And we're going to check for null as well. Alright, so now that I've successfully retrieved the phone number, we now need to convert it in a type of object that can be able to access the value inside of it. So I'm going to go ahead and check if the phone number is not null again. So this is very important. So if this is not null, so basically returning this is going to be in a form of hash map. But we won't be able to read the values if it's a hash map, right? Because this is C#, not Java. Now there is a solution to this. What we need to do will be to find a way to convert the hash map into a dictionary, a key value pair dictionary. In that way, we'll be able to access the keys and the values alongside of it. Now how to do this is very straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and define a new dictionary. I'm going to call it dictionary from hash map. Okay, so this is going to be equal to new android.runtime.java dictionary of the type of string and string. Alright, so inside of this method, there are different parameters that we need to pass. We need to pass it the phone number. So that is this phone number that will retrieve the document snapshot. So we're going to have phone number.handle, and I'm going to pass it android.runtime.jni handle ownership dot do not register. Boom. So this is actually the line of code that does all the magic. So with this, we'll now be able to read the values contained in the dictionary. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and use a loop because we don't know the number of phone numbers we'll have in that array. So we're going to use a loop, to go through all the items and the keys as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say for each key value pair. All right, so we're going to go ahead and resolve this. Okay, so this is supposed to inherit from the system.collection.generics. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that in manually. So I'm going to say using system.collection.generic. All right, so let's scroll back down. So here I'm going to have key value pair. This is exactly what we are looking for. So key value pair of string and string. All right, so I'm going to call it item in dictionary from hash map. All right, so this is exactly what we want to have. So with this, we can now easily access the item key and the item value. And how to do this is very simple. We can simply say item.key. This will give us the item key. You can as well do item.value. So this will give us item.value. All right, so this is exactly what we want to have at the end of the day. So let's go ahead and retrieve all the keys and the values in the dictionary from hashmap. So I'm going to define a new string. So I'm going to call this data result. Okay, so here I'm going to go ahead and say data result will be equal to data result plus item.key. So I'm going to just do a bunch of concatenations so that we'll be able to see how the item key relates to the values. So after every item key dot value, we're going to switch to a new line. And to switch to a new line in string is very simple. We're going to use the backslash and n. So this will make our string to jump to a new line. Alright, so this is basically all we need to do. Now to verify all of this, we need to go ahead and run our app. But before that, we also need to add the values of our full name and our email address to the string. So here I'm going to go ahead and say full name equal to, I'm going to add the full name here, and we're going to switch to a new line. Now the next thing we need to add is the email address. So here I'm going to have data result equal to email. So I'm supposed to add the old data. Okay, so this is a bunch of concatenations that we are doing here. So we need to ensure that we don't make mistakes. So this is going to be equal to and email, and we're going to go ahead and add a new line. Alright, so this is the first line and this is the second line. So every other line is now going to come from this loop that we have here. So the last thing we need to do will be to go ahead and display this in the result test view. But we don't have a reference to the result test view yet. So let's go ahead and reference it. So here I'm going to create a new test view. So I'm going to call this result test view. So inside the onCreateView method, we're going to go ahead and reference our result test view. Alright, so now that we reference this, let's go ahead and display our result on the result test view. So I'm going to scroll down. Okay, so at this point, I can easily go ahead and say result test view dot test. This is going to be equal to data result. Boom. So this is basically all that we need to do. Now to verify that all of this works, let's go ahead and run our app. Okay, so our app is starting. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull up our Firestore database. So what we expect to have when we click on retrieve is that we will be able to retrieve all of this data. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on retrieve. Boom. So as you can see, we're able to retrieve the user's full name, the email address, the work phone number, the mobile, and the home phone number. So this is more like the second part of what we want to do in this tutorial. Sometime in your app, you might actually want to update this array. Let's say the user has another phone number that you need to add to your database. So let's go ahead and look at how to update an array. So we're going to return back to Visual Studio. I'm going to stop this. So the first thing I need to do will be to grab a reference to the update button because we don't have it yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Now let's go ahead and reference the update button. So we're going to do that here. So let's go ahead and add a click event handler for the update button. So we're going to have update.click. Alright, so now that we have the click event handler, the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and update the phone number array. We want to add a new phone number to it. So this phone number can be, let's say the office phone number or the fax number. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing we need to do will be to grab a document reference. So we need to point to this document. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and say document reference. So I'm going to call this phone ref. So this is going to be equal to get Firestore. So get Firestore will return the instance of our database. Then we're going to call collections. The collections is users collections. Then .document. So this is the point where we need to provide the document ID, which is this. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste this here. Alright. So the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and update the phone number field, which is an array. So what we want to do will be to add a new item inside of the array. So how to do that is by saying phone ref dot update. So here we need to go ahead and write the key of the field that we want to update, which in this regard is phone number. So what we want to add to this phone number array is fax. So I can easily say .fax. Okay. So the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and provide the value of the fax. So let's say our fax number, does fax even exist? So let's say our fax number is 45. So this will basically go ahead and update the phone number array, and it's going to add a new item, and the item is fax. It's going to add it into the already existing array. So let's say we decide to change the value of the phone number, of the mobile phone number or the home phone number. So how to do that is by saying phone ref dot update. We can now pass phone number dot home as the key, and we need to go ahead and provide the value that we want to update. So this is actually how to go about updating already existing values. So if we go ahead and click our update button like this, it's going to go ahead and use this value to update the home phone number, which is already existing. While as this will go ahead and add fax into the already existing array. So this is actually how to update data in the array. So but for now we don't want to update this. So this is more like the only thing of interest here. So to verify that all of this works, let's go ahead and run our app. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the database so that we can see the changes automatically take place. So let's go ahead and click on retrieve. Okay, so we already have all of this. Now let's go ahead and click on update phone. Boom, so as you can see, fax was successfully added into the phone number array. So if I go ahead and click on update, oh, okay, we've already updated that, so this won't have an effect. So if I go ahead and click on retrieve, so as you can see now, fax has now been retrieved. Alright, so a recap of what we've done in this tutorial. We've been able to see how to save data to Firestore, not just ordinary data, right? So we looked at how to save arrays into a field. We went ahead to also look at how to retrieve the data in an array in a field, and also went ahead to learn how to update the values in an already existing array. But if you really like this video, I need you to do just one thing for me. Go ahead and hit the like button. Do it now. Alright, thank you very much. And if this is your first time of dropping by this channel, I need you to do just one thing for me. Hit the subscribe button and hit the bell as well. Alright, thank you very much. So this will be all for now. So see you guys later.